They told us you'd never forget this day, and I'm never going to forget it. Not a chance. People are mad. Now, I've been led to believe that people being mad means something's wrong and something needs to be fixed, and we will discuss that. The playoff rankings have dropped. Listen, right? Boom, in our lap. We are jam-packed. It is Sunday, December 7th, the year of our Lord 2025. We're coming to you live way earlier than we normally would because we need to come to you live earlier than we normally would. It's a very weird day. Some ways it's an unprecedented day in college football, and those seem to stack up on each other. The rankings just got released moments ago. I got full reaction to it. I was stunned. I'll tell you why I was stunned. I got conference championship game reactions because, yes, football games do still matter around here, and we do still talk about them after they occur. I am going to give you some thoughts on these first-round games in the playoff that we have. I know a lot of you have thoughts. I've never seen a more broad consensus come together about the structure of the playoff and how the playoff views G5 teams than I'm seeing right now. Almost to the point where I may need to step in and defend the G5 as G5 Josh. Sometimes I have to do that. Also, I don't know if anyone caught this. Jesse, did you catch this? Penn State hired Matt Campbell. Huh, interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Denton, Texas is tuned in. Montgomery, Alabama. Reno, Nevada. That's just me considering making a comment, Bradley. Reno, Nevada. Geneva, Georgia. Thank you guys so much. We're past 500,000 subs. That's old news on the channel, but not unappreciated news. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now the drive to 1 million begins. So if you're watching, we do this live. We do it all year round. It's just college football. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel. Okay. Man, we got so much to get to. The college football playoff rankings are out. They are final. We've got matchups set. The bracket is solidified. I was stunned. Stunned. First off, the ACC doomsday scenario played out. We telegraphed this for a couple of weeks, all right? About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we thought, man, if Duke gets in there, it looks like the committee may be faced with the prospect of Duke winning the ACC championship, not being ranked high enough. And then they got to make a decision. Are we really going to have a playoff bracket with no ACC representation? Then remember, Duke lost to Virginia in the regular season. And we thought, all right, well, that takes care of that. The ACC champ will be ranked high enough. Then the ACC'd so incredibly hard that we got back around the merry-go-round to the point where we said, wait a second, Duke's in the game, aren't they? Yes, because the tiebreaker is just nonsensical. Let's just shake your bowl like it's alphabet soup and whatever the letters assemble in. That's the tiebreaker. I think the alphabet soup tiebreaker in the ACC. And then we looked at it again. And we said, about 2-3 weeks ago, Duke's going to get in that thing. If they win it, all-out chaos. Because the question's going to be not whether Duke's going to get in. They were never going to be ranked high enough. It was going to be whether Miami could get themselves high enough to where the committee looked at it, and I don't care what Hunter Yurachek just said on the playoff show, they absolutely had to look at the prospect of not having a Power 4 team represented in the playoff or a Power 4 conference represented in the playoff and do something about it. And I think that's one of the things that happened here. When you look at Miami getting in at the 11th hour over Notre Dame, I believe the right thing was done. But the process behind it is so jacked up. The reasoning given was so jacked up. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I'm going to get back to Miami, Notre Dame in a second, but just I wrote ACC Doomsday Verified. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is we just were in Atlanta last night, and we saw Alabama get dump trucked by Georgia. And that led to a lot of folks leaving Atlanta last night, flipping over to the Big Ten championship game, Twitter fingers working. Alabama's got to drop, right? Well, no, they don't have to drop. They weren't going to drop. I was very confident in that. Like I said that going into the game, they gave me the theoretical of, well, what if they lose by 50? Well, then they lose by 50 and they're not a conference champ. They're not dropping out. That was so basic. You got to understand something. Whether you like what I'm going to say or not, I'm not telling you how it should be. I'm telling you how it is. The SEC championship is worth a whole lot of money. The SEC as a league runs and dictates a lot of this sport. There's not even anything wrong with that because that's how powerful they are. They have accumulated that power, not through false means. Like they're where most of the big brands are, and the Big Ten's where most of the big brands are. So if the Big Ten's championship game was in the same situation as the SEC's yesterday, I'd say the same thing about the Big Ten's championship game. A lot of people looked at Alabama lose last night, and they said, and I don't agree with this line of thinking, but they said, Well, if conference championship games are going to mean something, then there's got to be risk. No, there doesn't. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of a conference championship game within the overarching structure of the playoff. The meaning of a conference championship game, if you're already ranked inside the top 10, let's say, like Alabama was, is you only stand to benefit from it. Alabama could have won that game last night and then gone on to take a first-round bye, and so they would have benefited. Georgia did win the game, so they solidify a first-round bye. Oh, by the way, they win the conference championship, in the words of Kirby Smart, if that still means anything to you. But there was something to gain. What you're not going to have is you're not going to have several members of your conference, a la A&M, a la Ole Miss, a la Oklahoma, sit at home and watch the number one overall seed from that league risk lack of playoff inclusion for playing in a reward game. That was just never going to happen. And here's the other thing. If you think there's no punishment for losing that conference championship game, understand, from the time the regular season ended, for Alabama, for example, they needed to either win last night or understand they're one of the teams that's going to have to play 5 games to win a national title. Last night was the first one, and they lost. So now they got to play an opening round game. And then if they win that one, they got to play another game, and then another game, and then another game. And I know you're listening and saying, Alabama's not going to win the national title. No, probably not. But the point is, if they were to do that, the punishment for losing the game last night is they will have had to play 5 postseason games. So there is risk. But the risk was never, you're going to drop out for playing in a game that other people didn't earn the right to play in. That was never going to happen. By the way, I got a lot to say here. We do have the opening round lines from FanDuel, and some of these are probably going to interest you guys. In fact, Jesse, I didn't even write half of these down. I think I have them memorized, though. So James Madison is going to Oregon. I'm going to have, again, I know you're about to yell at the screen. I'm going to have plenty to say about this. Tulane is at Ole Miss. I'll just say them in order. Tulane is a 17.5-point dog at Ole Miss. That game already happened this year, by the way. James Madison does go to Oregon. Oregon is a 21.5-point favorite. Yes, these are playoff games. I didn't make the format, guys. I'm sorry. Alabama, believe it or not, opens as a 1.5-point favorite at Oklahoma. And then we've got Miami at A&M. For my money, the most attractive game of round one. A&M is a 5.5-point favorite. You need to assume there's 3 to 3.5 points of home field baked in there. So they're telling you A&M a little under a field goal favorite on a neutral field. Okay. You did text me times. Oh, Jesse, breaking news here. Okay, this is not inconsequential. All right, so these games, you know they take place on a Friday, Saturday. This is Friday, Saturday, right, Jesse? Oh, man, they did us a favor. Wow, this didn't pan out how I thought it would. Okay, Friday, December 19th, 8 p.m. Eastern, Alabama at Oklahoma, which gives us the ability on Saturday, December 20th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time to be at Miami A&M. Now, my only beef with this, and I'm not going to even pretend to understand how the broadcast structure was negotiated. Miami at A&M at Kyle Field at night would have been, in the words of many people, cinema. Instead, we're going to watch it as an 11 a.m. kickoff. So even with the home campus games, we can't get the kickoff times right. All right, I move on. December 20th. So that Saturday has 3 games. The mid-afternoon game, Tulane at Ole Miss, is a 3:30 Eastern kickoff. And then the primetime game is James Madison at Oregon. That's a 7:30 Eastern kickoff. 2 G5 games. Those games are on TNT. And that's a whole separate mess. TNT paid to sub-license these games, and that's what they're getting dropped in their lap. So if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, I'm upset 2 G5 teams are in the playoff, imagine being an executive at TNT. And you have no control over this, or maybe you do. So anyway, Notre Dame's out of the playoff. Notre Dame is not a playoff team. Notre Dame gets left out of the playoff at the 11th hour, and I have a Post-it stuck to my index finger, and it says, this is the first time I think Notre Dame's really been punished for not being in a conference. When the playoff got set up the way it was, people kept yelling what they've been yelling at Notre Dame for a long time, and that is, you need to join a conference. I've never yelled that at Notre Dame. I never will yell that at Notre Dame. I fully respect their independence. I've always said if I were a major university, I'd want to do what Notre Dame does. That would be an ideal situation. You call all your own shots. Your seat at the table carries as much weight as other conferences collectively carry at the table. Who wouldn't want to be in Notre Dame's position? But I did say, if you guys want to hold out this small sliver of hope that they'll ever become more motivated to join a conference, not that I think they will, but if you ever want to hold out hope that they'll become more motivated, you need to hope that they have to pay a price in the form of losing a playoff spot for not being in a conference. Now, for the first round of the playoffs last year, the first time we ever had one, there was this rule where if you didn't win a conference championship, you couldn't have a first round bye. But that only lasted 1 year. So that parameter got removed, and it looked for all the world like the stars were aligning for Notre Dame to just exist in this new world, pay no price. I think they paid a price for not being in a conference here. So Notre Dame gets left out. Miami vaults Notre Dame at the 11th hour. I actually agree with the rankings the committee put out. I actually agree that that should have been the way it panned out. Said that last week. And I've said that for a couple of weeks now. However, if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I probably disagree with what I just said on the surface. But even if we get past our initial disagreement, like, of course, you guys think Notre Dame should have been in, but even if you get past that, where we'll be aligned is the messaging here was so pathetic. The protocol and the lack of follow-through on the way the protocol is supposed to be applied was so pathetic, to the point where we're sitting here on Selection Sunday and we're really listening to a guy tell us we were incapable of fully appreciating head-to-head results until Brigham Young lost the Big 12 championship game so bad that we had to drop them and put Notre Dame and Miami next to each other. And all of a sudden, then it just dawns on us, holy crap, they played each other. Gustav, go get the footage of that game. Let's take a look at it. And then they claim they watched the game. Guys, they grinded tape last night, did the committee, into the wee hours of 8 p.m., and then it dawned on them that, guys, head-to-head. I mean, these resumes are comparable. Head-to-head's got to rule the day, which is sound logic, ... that could have been applied 2 weeks ago. It could have been applied last week. But the problem is, if there's one thing of the many that committee is guilty of, it is of knee-jerk reaction. They knee-jerked early on when they dropped Alabama as far as they did after the Oklahoma loss. They dropped Miami way too far in their initial rankings because it came on the heels of the loss to SMU. Notre Dame was probably already too high, and then they were forced to course correct. Which brings me to a point that I'll make later about how meaningless now and how dumb it is to have those weekly rankings reveal shows. I think they serve a negative purpose. Like, I think they serve an ulterior purpose now. They don't serve their initial purpose. So this should have been this way going into the weekend, but it wasn't. So then you create this mess. You're like Kevin with the pot of chili, and then you trip and you fall and you're wallowing all in it, and every one of us are looking saying, you know, it didn't have to be this way. It went how I thought it should have from a pure ranking standpoint. It went horrifically wrong from a messaging and presentation standpoint. So, look, I understand how this works. I understand. I got a lot of people who I really like, whose opinions I respect, that are going to be diametrically opposed, which is like the beauty of sport. This is always going to be a subjective sport, by the way. Well, at least it is right now. Who knows what the future format holds? But this is subjective, which means there are going to be varying degrees of opinion. My whole takeaway on this has been 95% of the opinions that I've heard thrown at me, whether it be about Notre Dame or Miami or Alabama or Brigham Young, they haven't been based on principled stance. They've just been based on rooting interest, which I'm okay with. I just wish people would say something like this: I'm a Miami fan, so I think since we beat them on a field to start the season, we should be in over them. Or if you're a Notre Dame fan, I just wish people would say, I think we're better than them now. That's why I think we belong in. Or if you're a Bama fan, just say, look, I think we played a tougher schedule, and so I don't think we should get punished for playing in a conference title game, or I hope we don't. We belong in. But there's no principle behind it, because if any of you, and I'm talking to the 95%, if any of you really just switched resumes, you'd end up making each other's points. So it's just rooting interest. So anytime someone tried to question, the ethical guidelines or the moral stance or anything right and wrong, it was all shades of gray to begin with. Do you honestly think if the resumes were reversed and Notre Dame beat Miami in week 1, and the rest of it played out the way it did. You don't think that every Notre Dame fan walking this planet would have been banging the head-to-head gong? Of course they would have, as they should. I would expect nothing less. That's my point. It's been my point for a couple of weeks. I don't have a problem with folks coming at me. It's just come at me and just say, I disagree for the sake of disagreement. I'm just flat out rooting for Alabama to get in, and I hope they get in, and I'm going to say whatever I think needs to be said for them to get in. I'd respect that. But we were looking earlier today. I'm not going to do it because we were going back in some notable college football figures' respective Twitter histories and finding them 1 year ago, making points totally counterintuitive to the points they were making today about what should and shouldn't matter in the playoff because of rooting interest. Now, I changed my mind with Florida State a couple of years ago, and Florida State folks still think I flip-flopped on that. I did not. I still think it was BS. As I said in the weeks leading up to the playoff reveal, that Jordan Travis's injury was going to be factored by the committee. The value of his loss was going to be factored by the committee, and I said that shouldn't matter because of the results on the field. I don't need a committee to tell me how many points they think a player is worth when the results on the field should carry the day. The reason I changed was because Bill Hancock, the week of the selection, did an interview. He was the playoff committee chair, or I think he was a very important figure in the playoff scene. And he said, most deserving has never been in our lexicon. We're putting in the best teams. I thought that was garbage. I still think that it was garbage that he did that, just like I would have thought today. If they said, we put Notre Dame in because we think they're the better team, I thought that would have been garbage because I don't care who you think's the better team. I don't care who I think is the better team. And so if I don't care about my opinion, you know full well I don't care about your opinion. But back to the Florida State example. When he said that, I came on the show. You remember this, Jesse? Because we had a big production meeting, and I said, I've got to put what I think to the side because I'm not on the committee. That guy just told us where the committee's head's at. And so whether I like it or not, based on the new stated protocol, Alabama belongs in over Florida State because Alabama would be favored. Alabama's the quote-unquote better team. That was it. That was all. But I've stayed pretty consistent on it. Florida State fans would disagree with that. Today, I at least respect, even if it was completely backwards, it was more backwards than the Penn State coaching search, but at least they got to the right outcome. I do respect that the committee, I thought, got to the right outcome. When I say right, I just mean the one I agree with. There really is no right or wrong here. Teams being mad, though, is not automatically evidence that something's broken. I keep going back to this. There's always going to be a lot of argument on Selection Sunday, and contrary to popular belief, there will be, no matter how far you expand this playoff. There will always be disagreement. My point when it was 4 teams is the same point I'll make when it's 12 teams. Just because a fan base or a coach or a program is mad doesn't mean something's broken. It just means you've got a finite amount of a very valuable commodity, in this case, playoff spots, and not everyone can get one. Had Bama gotten left out today, I'd disagree with it, but I wouldn't claim that it was the end of the world. You know why? Because they had a shot to take it out of the committee's hands, and they didn't get the job done. And by the way, they would be a very flawed team that never would have whiffed a 4-team playoff just a few years ago. Notre Dame missed out. You could have won games and changed your fate, but you didn't. Miami could have missed out. And I could very easily look back to the Louisville and SMU games. Point being, there's just a bunch of flawed resumes here that we're looking at. And I always promised myself I would take this approach, and I would say, I didn't even want to expand the playoff to begin with. So surely I'm not going to allow myself to slip down this mental drain of arguing that the 12th or 13th team got screwed. No, I'm not going to get that worked up about it because you never would have even been in the picture a few years ago. But even if it's 12 teams, that doesn't mean the answer is to expand to 16. The answer is look the teams in the eyes who are upset and just say, do better next time. What are they going to do? Stop playing? They're not going to stop playing. They're going to get motivated to take it out of the committee's hands. All right, if you're in the batter's box and there's a pitch right there, lower outside corner, but it's an 0-0 count, you can take it knowing full well the worst that's going to happen is it's 0-1. Or, to put it to football terms, Ohio State lost last night. They're in the playoff comfortably. You know why? Because they bought themselves a ton of equity. Ohio State is a team that would have been viable in the 4-team format. Alabama can't say that. Miami can't say that. Notre Dame can't say that. Vandy can't say that. Texas can't say that. Brigham Young can't say that. And so just because you're mad doesn't mean something's broken. Do better next time. That's the answer. It'd be the answer no matter who was the first left out today. But I do think that there are changes coming. I do think that committee, just like they did this past year, they had one round and then they adjusted their terms, and now they've had another round, and I think they're going to adjust their terms again. I do think a lot of people have started to throw around one of the proposals that we've made on the show, and that is, if you're going to make the playoff, shouldn't you at least have a minimum baseline ranking? I don't know what that ranking would be. Shouldn't you have to be top 15? Shouldn't you have to be top 20? But a lot of people are looking at the fact that we've got 2 G5 teams in here. And of course, that's a joke. It's a complete joke. It's an utter disgrace to the overall spirit of what this thing's supposed to be about, that I got a team like Notre Dame sitting at home. Notre Dame could legitimately make a run to win a national title. They have that maximum capability. They're going to sit at home so that we made room for a team to be a 3+ touchdown underdog in Eugene, Oregon. So yes, even the most diehard of G5 Cinderella supporters out there understand from a pure principled standpoint, this makes no sense. And so I do think something will be done to address that. I also am strongly urging our friends at ESPN to rethink the concept of a weekly rankings reveal show for a couple of reasons. Number one, you back yourselves into a corner when you release college football playoff rankings every week. Like the crowd that says we shouldn't have AP votes and AP polls and rankings until week 5, what you really ought to be yelling at the poll that matters is maybe you guys ought not release that thing until Selection Sunday. Because had the committee not let you know what they thought about Notre Dame and Miami relative to each other, had you never known that Miami dropped to 18 and then worked their way all the way back up, had you never known that Alabama jumped Notre Dame yesterday or last week leading into yesterday, like had you not known all that, you wouldn't have nearly as much to complain about. And think about the entire side market of conspiracy and therefore content. Conspiracy equals content in our world that it creates when you're thinking you know what the playoff rankings are. You're guessing. You've looked at the AP. You've looked at like McClintock and those guys, Dave Bartu and those guys do a great job at letting you know, hey, here, based on our modeling, here's what the committee rankings would be right now. But you wouldn't unequivocally know until Selection Sunday. Imagine being in the dark totally until Selection Sunday. Now, the counter argument to that is, well, if we think this process is corrupt now, imagine how much more corrupt it would be if we didn't have to have minimum baseline accountability with them making their results public week to week, which is a valid counterpoint. I think the third point that I would make, if you're going to have the week to week, is you've got to publicize the deliberation. You've got to publicize it. Now, we know that will never happen because the committee does not operate the way they tell you they operate. That committee is not full of 12 or 13 ADs or whatever sitting there with their readers all the way down on the tips of their noses, just meticulously grinding over data and tape as their 4th cup of coffee is delivered at 2:38 a.m. That's not the way it works. I have long maintained they get a simple spreadsheet, the computer spits it out to them and does 95% of the work for them, and then they just kind of move the chess pieces around a little bit at the very end if they need to. But I do think changes will come on that front. The 5 seed is just golden yet again in this format. The 5 and 6 seeds, unless this thing changes, but especially the 5 seed, is such an opportunistic place to be that I ask, what would you rather do? The Oregon Ducks are the 5 seed. What would you rather do? Now, Dan Landing's a good friend of the program, and I would never be able to convince him to come on air and say, we were totally cool not playing in the Big Ten championship game yesterday, but they were totally cool not playing in the Big Ten championship game yesterday. And those are not his words. I'm speaking for him, which I am at liberty to do. And I'm asking you, do you want to win the Big Ten title? Of course you do. But your ultimate goal here is to win a national championship. Where would you rather be? Would you rather have to play in a game yesterday and risk losing like Bama did and then play in a first-round game anyway, or would you rather be parked right there where Oregon is, be a 21.5-point favorite in round 1, win the game at home, and then advance to round 2 You're going to play Texas Tech. But if you beat Texas Tech, if you play Texas Tech, like, you're looking at a roster advantage. You're probably looking at a roster advantage against the first and second teams you play. You may have one against the third team you play, but just forget about the matchups for a second. If you're the 5 seed, you're playing the 12 seed, which until further notice is going to be a G5 team. You didn't have to play a game yesterday, so you'll be 3 weeks rested by the time that game happens. And then you get to play what equates to a warm-up game before you play another team that's been rested. And you found out last year, having a first-round bye is not the best thing in the world. So you get to play a playoff game almost as a tune-up opportunity. That 5 seed, great spot to be. 6 seed, as it turns out this year, is Ole Miss, and they're facing a team that they beat, 45-7 or something like that the first time around. So yes, we have our playoff bracket set. It's unfortunate that we have 2 games that are 17-plus point spreads in round 1, but we do have 2 of them that are must-see. Look at the potential second-round matchups. We could get Miami against Ohio State or A&M against Ohio State. Either way, from a pure talent profile, outside of Texas, those will be the best groups that Ohio State's faced this year. Check me on that, Jesse. Who else will Ohio State have faced? Michigan's not to that level. They didn't face Oregon this year. Indiana's not to that level. Indiana may be a better football team, but I'm just talking about pure talent roster, which is not the end-all, be-all. I understand that. But from a pure athleticism and talent roster makeup, A&M and or Miami may present the best challenge that Ohio State has seen this side of Texas. Now, they beat Texas, but that doesn't mean they weren't athletically matched across the board from Texas. We could get Ole Miss, Georgia rematch. We're going to get an Oregon, Texas Tech. We could get either Oklahoma, Indiana, or if it's Alabama, Indiana, that's DeBoer against his old team. And either way, it's Kurt Cignetti sitting there playing a playoff game. Just incredible. So, yeah, there you go. It's incredibly dry in the studio right now. Unfortunately, the only lip balm we had left was this red kind. So I'm not wearing lipstick, I promise. Boy, Quick Trip had a busy weekend with us this weekend. Quick Trip was present and accounted for at our live show Friday night in Atlanta, which I'll talk about later. It went better than best case scenario. Unbelievable. More to come. They fueled us there, and they fueled you. Because, Jesse, I don't know how many cards we handed out, maybe 1,000. But we handed out a whole lot of Quick Trip gas cards. So a lot of people showed up and left with a free tank of gas. I'm told that Quick Trip even got heavily involved at the concession stand. So that's great. And then on the way home, tanks running low, just hit Quick Trip up. If your energy's running low, cold brew on tap. If your tummy's grumbling a little bit, I don't have time to list all the assortment and variety of snacks and just straight up outright food that would pass for a real meal that they have inside. But we appreciate Quick Trip, man. Appreciate them big time. I got plenty more to say about the playoff, trust me. I'm going to spread it throughout the show. The SEC championship game happened yesterday. We were there, fueled by Quick Trip, no less. We went down to Atlanta. A bunch of our friends of the program were there. We did the ESPN Altcast. I'll tell you guys about that in a little while. That was amazing. A lot of you tuned in for that, I'm told. The game gets 1.5 Chali. And that's music to the ears of Georgia fans because finally you exercise a lot of the demons that you've had against Alabama and you're able to celebrate in the fourth quarter. I was on the Georgia sideline last night. I will tell you, it wasn't quite the TCU game from a few years ago. Like, they weren't going to the concessions and getting chicken wings and eating them on the sideline. It wasn't that bad. But there were a lot of, top button undone, arms spread over the bleachers, sort of just leaned back, taking it all in the fourth quarter of that game. So, what have we said on this show about Georgia all year? You got to cut the head off the snake. And several teams had the chance to cut the head off the snake that is Georgia, and you didn't cut the head off the snake. You remember the Tennessee game earlier this year? Went to overtime. Tennessee misses a field goal that would have won the game. Could have been another loss, but it wasn't. Bama beat them in the regular season. That was their only blemish. You remember the Auburn game? Georgia just totally dead in the water. Could have been down 17-0 at half. Instead, it's 10-3 at the half. Auburn couldn't cut the head off the snake. Florida, they're down late in the fourth quarter, and they have to drive to win that game. Florida had a chance to really kind of define and stamp their season, but they couldn't cut the head off the snake. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin are up 2 possessions on Georgia in Athens, second half, fourth quarter even. Georgia comes back to win, couldn't cut the head off the snake. So many people gripped that shovel. So many people tried, and Georgia just last minute darts to the left, darts to the right. And what ends up happening? They faced Texas 3 weeks ago, and they stuff them in a locker, and everyone leaves going, uh-oh, we didn't cut the head off the snake. And then they do what they did against Georgia Tech last week. I know that looks like a close game. That game never felt like it was in doubt. And they go right back to that same building 8 days later, and it's another of many, many examples of how unmatched I think Georgia's competitive character is in the SEC. You could argue Ohio State nationally, and that's about the only one that I would listen to from a pure competitive culture standpoint. Doesn't mean you're going to win every game, but it does mean if you beat Georgia, you brought your A game to do it. Very, very rarely do they do it for you. And also, I think it's such a testament, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, to how hard they keep coaching all year. It's not a situation where you coach hard in the spring and then summer and then fall camp, and then once you get to week 1, you just are who you are. No, it's like a starting point for them. But the culture has been questioned at times around Georgia. I've always pushed back on it, and I've taken a lot of heat for it. Because when they had the off-the-field incidents that happened in droves a couple of years ago, everyone said, oh, Georgia's culture sucks. Georgia's culture competitively doesn't suck. And believe me, I know what the pushback there is. The pushback was then and still is probably, oh, just because you stack a bunch of great football players on top of each other, that's not indication of culture. Anyone can win when you have great players. No, they can't. No, they can't. Also, there's a lot of skill in stacking the great players because they don't really cut corners there to do it. If you're familiar with the Georgia recruiting approach, you know they're not always going to outspend you, and they're not really going to apologize or sugarcoat what it's like there because they count on that being a filtration part of the recruiting process, and they don't want every 4 and 5 star to come through that filter. They want the filter to catch a lot of the guys that would melt inside Georgia. I was standing there talking to someone last night, and they said, man, I can't believe Alabama didn't get up for this game. And I kind of laughed. I said, what do you mean get up? He said, man, they just didn't get up like Georgia got up this week. It's so obvious. They didn't get up this week any more than they normally would. They played a pretty good game last night. They played a 3-phase game. They were very effective. They dominated the game. But please understand, that's not Georgia getting up. It's not about the music you listen to the day of the game or the inspirational video you watch the night before the game or the text that your uncle sends you in all caps or the bus ride over there. That's not how you win games. They got up for this game in February. They got up for the game the third week of April. They get up for the game with the decisions they make on a random Tuesday morning in July when they could be home if they want to, or how they handle a practice in the middle of the season when they may have like Austin P on deck. It's a standard. That's what competitive culture is. And anybody who dips below that standard, they don't last at places like that very long. And I say places like that, there really aren't many. But it's on display in games like last night. So this wasn't some vintage, high-flying blowout effort. What it was a very, very complimentary approach where they just suffocated Alabama. -3 rushing yards is impressive, and I don't really care who you're facing. But dominance looks like that. So dominance is Georgia scoring 4 touchdowns with 3 drives starting in Alabama territory. That's a blocked punt. That's an interception. And their 4th scoring drive, I think, started on the Bama 43. Special teams tilted the field so hard. This is like what Oklahoma did to Alabama, by the way. You want a paper popper. Georgia's starting field position average was their 40-yard line. Alabama's average starting field position was their 18-yard line. This is another one. A lot of paper poppers. Kirby gave us a record number of paper poppers. 12 Bama drives last night. None of them started at better than the Alabama 25-yard line. So the best start that Bama had last night, they had 75 yards to go to score a touchdown. Georgia 4 of 4 in the red zone. Alabama was held to negative rushing yardage. And honestly, I was standing on the field, so you don't exactly know where those numbers are stacking up. But the one thing that was very apparent, as a guy who also stood on the field to watch Georgia-Texas, is it felt like the Georgia-Texas game. They had 3 sacks. That's great. They had 18 pressures on Ty Simpson. And that's kind of what they did to Arch, and that's kind of what that front has done to Texas a few times that they've played them. They hadn't handled Alabama like that until last night. I know Bama's banged up. Everyone's banged up. No one needs to make the excuse for me. But that performance from a Georgia pass rush and a Georgia front that's gotten healthier and it's continued to elevate, that second part's the most important part. Their football players are playing their best right now. That stood out. Like, yeah, there may have been some miracle where Alabama just threads the needle, but they were going to have to do that. And by the way, the Bama defense, when I was driving out of there, I heard some fans talking about Kane Womack. Oh, man, Bama's defense dropped the ball. Dude, Alabama's defense was the least of their problems last night. Missing LT Overton, and still Georgia's longest play was 19 yards, guys. You can't give average starting field position like that. You can't let that many drives start in your territory and look and say, all right, defense, we're not going to do anything to help you out. We're not going to score. I mean, we couldn't throw our way out of a wet paper bag. We certainly couldn't run our way through tissue right now. Don't you let them score, though. Yeah, that's not the way football really works. So it was a very disappointing performance by Alabama, but, man, that has a lot to do with the team lined up across from them. But the whole take that we had coming into this one, I picked Georgia to win a close game. The reason you don't ever want to give them Bama is because they've had this mental edge against Georgia. But also, you do know there's this tightrope that Alabama offensively has to walk. If they walk it, they can win. But the point is the tightrope walk. Every Alabama drive feels like a tightrope walk. And the whole thing about a tightrope walk is if you make it to the other side, it's great. It's legendary. Everyone remembers it. Why do they remember it? Because the risk is you fall off the tightrope. And if everything doesn't go right, if everything's not clicking right now because they can't run the ball and that offensive line's banged up, and I would argue Josh Cuevas, number 80 for him, is an extremely underappreciated facet of their offense. He didn't play last night. And so you got freshman tailbacks, which makes the tailback pass ineffective out of the backfield. You don't have your usual third down safety valve in Cuevas. Your offensive line's beat to death. If you don't walk the tightrope, you die. They weren't able to walk the tightrope last night. That's kind of why I've been phrasing it like that. It's cool when it works, but Georgia threw the crowbar in the spokes last night. That's exactly what happened. Now, because we know now that Alabama's made the playoff, the following question is how much healthier can they get? And they've got confidence they can get a fair amount healthier, obviously, than they were last night. But the reason I'm not focusing on health a whole lot is because, guys, Georgia played without their starting center last night. And Tim Keenan, I mean, coming back from injury the first time these teams played, was fully healthy last night. And that was not even a focal point of that game much. We got to the fourth quarter, and I looked at Lewan and I said, have we even mentioned the lack of Drew Bobo tonight? Have we even mentioned his absence? No. Did you hear Kirby Smart after this game? One of the reasons why I kept hammering the drum that Alabama losing that game was not going to cost them a playoff spot is because the SEC was not going to allow that to happen. I don't mean they technically control the playoff committee. I mean the playoff committee was well aware. If we remove a participant from the playoff or from the playoff that was in the SEC championship game that otherwise would have been in the playoff, it is curtains as far as the SEC is concerned. They were going to go scorched earth. Kirby made a good point in his post-game press conference last night. He said, we're about to move to 9 conference games. You just witnessed our 9th league game this year. Us and Alabama just played our 9th league game. And it's like Georgia, the winning team, crawls to the podium with cuts and scrapes all over them, and their mouths bleeding, and they may be concussed, figuratively, of course. And they're like, that's the winning team. And he said, he talked about Alabama. He said they're beat to death too. Like, that's their 9th league game. That's just what we're going to voluntarily enter ourselves into. And then this would be the 10th SEC game that some of us play. And he said there's a lot of concern around the league right now. A lot of people think that's whining until they come and coach or play in the SEC, and they find out, like, this is the only league where the bad teams have a whole bunch of Sunday talent. This is, like in the SEC, the way recruiting is Dylan Stewart will legitimately decide to go to South Carolina over Georgia or Alabama. That would never happen in the Big Ten. The Big Ten's so perfectly set up right now because the Big Ten, there's a tighter concentration of talent. The good players are going to go to 3 or 4 programs. They're not choosing Wisconsin. They're not choosing Michigan State. That's just not going to happen. In the SEC, dude, Arkansas gets some players. Like South Carolina gets players. And you'll look at them and you'll say, what are you doing? Well, those places disproportionately take football more serious. And so the trade-off is, and here's what sucks in the end, none of your teams may be as good as Ohio State or Indiana. We'll see. But the middle pack, they still beat up on you, and you may go in there and beat them 20-9 or something like that in week 7, but your training room looks no less crowded that following Sunday morning just because the team you played had a bad record. And now they're going to sign up for more of those. Look, the Kalen DeBoer Year 2 experiment, it's not an experiment, the era, Year 2, is still playing out. I'm gonna reserve judgment. You know, we can do the post-mortem once their season's done. It's not done now. They're going to the playoff. I kind of thought both of these teams last night should be proud to get to that moment. I mean, if you know, like the public injury report is only a small part of the story for that team right there. I mean, I would argue it's far worse than the injury report made it look. Georgia's the same way. Okay, so both of the teams can say this, but Georgia won, so you don't have to contextualize it. With Alabama, they're banged up badly. They're going to play a game. They got at least one more game they get to play against Oklahoma. Let's see how that thing plays out. You know, because I'm still an extremely high believer in Kalen DeBoer in these big leverage situations. Let's see how that looks. But overall, just kind of offensively, I just felt like they had nowhere to turn. Georgia gave them nowhere to turn. Their own execution or lack thereof gave them nowhere to turn. I will say this, though. A bunch of you were following along just our overall journey this week. This week was incredible for us. It started Thursday. We went up to New York City. We did get up on look, when Mike Greenberg hits you up and says, I need you in New York, I need you in studio, we got to talk multiple segments of college football, you look at your phone and you go, oh, is he serious? Wow, good for Greeny. And you go up there. And we did that Thursday. And then you come home and you do your live show in Nashville that Thursday night, slightly pre-recorded on Thursday. We went down to Atlanta on Friday, and we sold out the Buckhead Theater there in Atlanta. Look at you guys. This was an incredible moment. We did not broadcast this live because that's the value of attending a ticketed event. Kublik joined us, even though we had complications getting in the building. Will Compton, Taylor Lewan joined us there. We had a bunch of friends of the program show up. Alyssa Lang stopped by. Chris Doring stopped by. We had Peter Burns join us on stage. We had exclusive merch that's only available at our live event. And I don't know whatever my expectations were for that merchandise, but you guys blew that away. Everything about the show was better than best case scenario. We intentionally went into that show having no format. I didn't even take a piece of paper on stage with me. We had no idea how we wanted it to go. So I literally told our production team, turn the mics on, that's it. Open the doors and turn the mics on. So we learned a few lessons, obviously. But that was so fun, and it was the first time that we've ever had an event where in very, very large numbers, our audience comes together. And about 1,000 of you were there. That's as many as we could fit in there. So you guys can attest to this. But for the many, many more of you who weren't there and who will hopefully be able to attend the several of these we do in the future, yes, that's happening. The vibe was pretty incredible. You never know what to expect. You know, when you've built an audience like ours, but you haven't had those kind of events, you don't know what it's like when everyone gets together. I don't know how to describe it. It felt like a family reunion, just a great big family reunion. It's unbelievable. So I've always known the attachment. I've always known how loyal you guys are to the show, and me in turn to you. Like I've always known that. But it was really nice to see it validated, I guess, with a real tangible example. So that was, man, it was a load of fun. We're going to do several more of those. You know, so anyone who had FOMO, if you had fear of missing out on that one, we'll do that several more times. We had some very, very high-level meetings on Friday with a bunch of very important people who are very interested in taking those concepts and duplicating them several times over. And that includes the next day when myself, along with Harry Douglas, along with Taylor Lewan and Will Compton, were just handed microphones by ESPN and thrown on national television to call the SEC championship game. This right here is some of the most fun I've ever had. Kirby Smart, right before the SEC championship game, walks up and says, guys, you got to make sure you enjoy this. Well, we did. We did. It was bumpy out of the gate, because none of us have done that before. But eventually, Tebow comes up, very inquisitive, happy to assist him, any kind of advice he needed. This was so much fun. We got great traction on this. This is a concept that I highly expect we'll be able to explore again. Big time thanks to Pat McAfee. Pat McAfee is why we were able to do this. That is Pat's package. That recording artist, Pat McAfee, mind you, that is his package. That is his property, and he was able to put us on it. And then thanks to ESPN for trusting us enough to be able to execute it. Man, that was real fun. I've never done play-by-play before. I've never done broadcast and color before. So that was a really, really fun pool to just dip the toe in. But again, I want to circle back to the same thing I said about the live show. We cannot do any of it without what this audience has done, without what the Bussin' audience has done for those guys. And there's very, very heavy overlap there, and we understand that, and we really, really appreciate that. And you guys have given us so many opportunities, and I promise you, again, you can tell I'm sort of bursting at the seams to be able to say more, but I can't right now. We're going to have many, many more opportunities because of that. And then I have to always follow that up with promising you that doesn't mean anything about the show. We are never going to screw the show up. The show is going nowhere other than where it is right now, the same way it is right now. Anything we get because of the success of the show will be in addition to. It will be an ornament on the tree. The show's the tree. So, Pate State forever. Let us move on. We had yet another conference championship game last night. I get home in Nashville in time to watch the whole second half, and of course I've since gone back and watched the entire Big Ten championship game. And you guys did it. You guys did it. Indiana 13, Ohio State 10. We deliberated 2.5 chali on this game. You could easily argue 3. It's very weird. A 3-point game in a conference title game. I think we'll get some pushback on that. I think some people thought that may be a 4 chali game. I couldn't help but watch it. Before I talk a bunch of Indiana, I couldn't help but watch it and say, this seems familiar. Ohio State's played this game half a dozen times this year. This kind of compressed, compacted game. They play kind of conservative, but you're sitting there thinking to yourself, they're playing this way because they don't need to play any other way. I've seen that before from them. What I haven't seen is that against a premier opponent that limits your scoring drives and you're unable to convert scoring opportunities. That happened last night. That was really the big difference. So that means giant tip of the cap, if I was wearing one, to Indiana. Because what we have here is we have our bad luck game of the year. The bad luck stat is opposite of the padlock stat. The padlock stat on this show is the one thing or the one stat that if I told you Friday, you would have known the outcome of the game. A bad luck stat is the kind of stat that would so badly have misled you, you would have bet your house or your farm, perhaps you live on a farm, and you would have lost it all. This was the latter. This is a bad luck stat game of the year. And it's very simple. If I tell you that Indiana's scoring 13, you are printing the programs. You are buying the merchandise. You are assembling the bags of confetti for Ohio State. They have won the Big Ten championship. And you know what? That's not true. Because Indiana scored 13, and it was good enough because the other guy only scored 10. That is the fewest amount of points Indiana has scored in a game under Curt Cignetti, and they won a conference title anyway. It's the fewest points Indiana has scored in a win since 2001. Fernando Mendoza surged in the Heisman odds after this game, and that's wonderful. And he cut one of the all-time legendary promos on that field after the game, and me knowing full well there's a lot of America that has not watched an Indiana game so far this year, therefore you haven't heard Fernando Mendoza talk, and that had to be, in the best of ways, just a cold splash of water to the face. Fernando Mendoza's one of one. Diego Pavia's one of one. Whatever the oil and the water of the Heisman odds were, and whatever the oil and water of personality is, you've got it on display. I mean, Pavi is dressed to the nines with his entourage walking into a UFC fight last night with his team recording the entire thing. And Fernando Mendoza is replacing the F word with flipping on national TV. Multiple times in his thanks and his effusive praise of his team and his teammates and his creator. And I have full respect for that. I'm not making fun of him. I'm just saying if you listen to it and you've never heard Fernando Mendoza talk, you might have thought to yourself, what is this? What is happening? What is going on? A Big Ten championship winning quarterback. That's what's going on. So we get to see him go to the playoff, but that's not what stands out. Boy, that was long-winded. I plan on that being 5 seconds. Great for all those guys. Here's what happened last night. Bryant Haynes locked up the Broyles Award, and I'm a voter, so I'm sort of publicizing my vote here. Indiana's defensive coordinator locked up the Broyles Award last night, as far as I'm concerned. Holds Ohio State to a season low in points, season low in rush yards, 5 sacks for that defense, 9 tackles for loss. They owned the red zone. They held Ohio State to 4 of 12 on 3rd and 4th down. Again, imagine pulling up to the building in the buses. Hey, Bryant, offense is going to score 13 for you. Is that enough? And he goes, yeah, we'll be good. He was right, as it turns out. Ohio State played this game. Oh, boy. Let me think. No matter what I say here, it's going to be put in the hype video for whenever they play a playoff game. You know what? Ryan Day's done a lot for us. I owe this to Ryan Day. Ohio State played like Meemaw used to drive. Not reckless, not irresponsible. I don't mean those things at all. I just mean they played like they had some time to kill. That's how Meemaw used to drive. Meemaw was like the Tom Coughlin of leaving early to arrive early. If you're 10 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're 10 minutes late. And so Meemaw would always leave with plenty of time. Like church started at 7, we would leave her house at 6:20, knowing full well it's only 20 minutes away. Well, here's the trade-off. We're going to do 64 miles an hour in the right lane because we got time to kill. We don't need to be anywhere 5 minutes from now. And that's just how I felt like Ohio State played last night. They had 2 drives, trailing, mind you. They had a couple of drives. One of them was 12 plays, 70 yards, took about 7 minutes. Another drive was 15 plays, 81 yards, took about 8 minutes, and got 0 points out of either of those. And they were down 13-10 as those drives happened. The red zone's still an issue with them. Missed field goal, can't convert on 4th down. I just kept thinking to myself, how are they this deep in the game and not allowing that wide receiver core to take over? Now, the logical counter to that is, well, if you're so high on Bryant Haynes and that defense of Indiana, maybe they weren't letting them take over. No one dictates what Ohio State's wide receiver room is able to do. If they are able to, like if alignment or if matchups are able to dictate that Jeremiah Smith ends up being a non-factor late in the game, it is a dereliction of coaching duty. It's not that he lost his potential. It's not that he lost his talent. And it's also not that you got him on a team where it's him and a bunch of middle schoolers. You're so loaded in that room. There's just no excuse for Ohio State to be that bottled up, but they were. So Curt Cignetti, the worst nightmare to me of like every other head coach in the country. Curt Cignetti's ruined it for a lot of guys. A lot of guys look at Cignetti and they probably, praise him publicly, but behind the scenes, do you understand how hard he has made other coaches' lives? Because he burns all the excuse making. Because if Curt Cignetti can walk into Indiana in year 1 and do what he did, and then follow it up with the year 2 performance, no one gets to ask for patience anymore. No one gets to look at their AD and say, we just don't have enough resources. No one gets to say, we just got to recruit a little better. Because the AD is going to look back and say, well, Sig doesn't have to. Curt Cignetti didn't say that. And what do you say? Well, you're going to say, well, we're not Indiana. They're not accepting that. Well, I'm not Curt Cignetti. That dude was at JMU searching for an opportunity in his 60s that Indiana finally gave him. They're not accepting that. Now, I'm not saying that's logical or rational. I'm saying it is. That's just the way it's going to be. And I go back to last year. Here's where I was so wrong about him. Curt Cignetti kind of turned what we thought was the main event into the warm-up act. Last year, they come out of nowhere. This is one of the stories of college football season. And they overachieved so drastically that even though they got blown out against Ohio State and they got handled pretty thoroughly against Notre Dame, like my perspective was, don't hold them to the standard you would Georgia. This is Indiana. You've got to be effusive in your praise that they're even in this conversation. But the follow-up was, yeah, it's probably a one-time deal, though. And they'll fall back to earth. That was just their warm-up. This team was so much better this year than last year's team. This team, we ended up having them power rated number 2. By the time they played Ohio State, and well before that, they were a legitimate number 2. I'm talking, when I say power rating, I mean like odds making, who would be favored, neutral field, that sort of thing. Last year, Indiana was never that. They were an inflated record because they played an inferior schedule and they executed really well. But then when it came time to play the big boys, they got put in their place. This year, they are the big boy. And they put one of the other ones in its place yesterday. And now we get to see them with a first-round bye. They're the number 1 overall seed in the playoffs. They're the Big Ten champs. And I don't want to fall victim to knee-jerk reaction or speak hyperbolically, but I don't know how you don't at least consider Curt Cignetti on Mount Rushmore. Of college football, Josh? No. Oh, you mean of all sports? No. No, just the Mount Rushmore. Just the Mount Rushmore. I know it's only presidents so far, but none of them have won Big Ten titles. None of them. Could a Theodore Roosevelt? You think Abraham Lincoln is winning the Big Ten in year 2 anywhere, much less at Indiana? I don't think so. So give me Sig on Mount Rushmore. Who says no? And if you say no, you better give me good reason. Do you guys know we got several college football games left? We do have playoff season coming up. SeatGeek is there. A lot of you cashed in on our discount there over the weekend, and I had a few testimonials sent my way. So here's our main viewpoint on this. You guys are going to buy tickets. We're huge college football fans, but this could also be for basketball. It could be a concert. Whatever your needs may be. I know our audience. Most of you attend live events. Therefore, you've got to buy tickets. Now, maybe your uncle owns an oil company and he can get you fixed up in his suite. Great. Congrats. We're so happy for you. But the rest of us have to buy our tickets the semi-old-fashioned way. I say semi-old-fashioned because I don't think SeatGeek was around in 1992. I don't think those Braves, Pirates, NLCS tickets were available on SeatGeek. However, Oklahoma, Alabama tickets, they will be available. JMU, Oregon tickets, they will be available. Now, since you're going to buy the tickets, go to SeatGeek, and right before you check out, I get you a discount. I get you 10% off your order. Just enter the code PATE10, P-A-T-E-10. That's 10% off any tickets, not just college football playoff. Make sure you click the link in the description. It's right there below the video. You can download the app. You got the code automatically added to your account if you click on that link. So click the link and it's fine. Don't click the link. Just memorize PATE10. All right, back to the show. So these first-round matchups, I did want to comment on these, and I did want to say hey to everyone. I'm told they're playing NFL games right now, and we got like 11, 12,000 people watching live. So I appreciate you guys. I'm going to get back to the playoff here. Since the round 1 games are set, I do have a few thoughts on these. Like Alabama's going to play Oklahoma round 1. We just saw the game a few weeks ago in a different venue. We saw Oklahoma come to Tuscaloosa. Remember, that was the game. Yeah, you guys remember. That was the game I was so confident in. Alabama's got a little bit of a roll going on, and Model loves Alabama. I think it was -5.5 or -6.5. We laid the points, and the thing about the box score of the game was we got everything we thought we would get from a production standpoint, except one small problem, and that was -3 in the turnover column. And I remember I would love to excuse this away. I would love for them to be those freak kind of, ball hit an offensive lineman's helmet, popped up in the air, and an OU linebacker caught it. It was not that. It was Oklahoma forcing turnovers, and truthfully, it could have been a lot worse because there were some fumbles that OU didn't recover that they forced. So we saw the game a few weeks ago, and OU ended up winning a close game in Tuscaloosa. Same issue here. If Oklahoma is able to limit that run of Alabama's, and why not? Everyone else does. So if they're able to do that again, and it comes down to Ty Simpson throwing, this time it's him trying to do it on the road. Norman, Oklahoma hosting a playoff game. Going to be pretty special. So it's him having to do it on the road. It is a night kickoff. That place will be lubricated. No immunity. It just is what it is. He had success against them the first time around statistically, but it came at a price. And the price was them having to rely on a high-leverage offensive game script and Brent Venables making them pay the price. So again, we're going to see Oklahoma after a few weeks off here. Until further notice, we have to assume that John Mateer kind of is what he's going to be. I don't know that, but I'm going to assume maybe limited production from Oklahoma offensively, but just like Indiana showed us last night, if you're putting up 13, it doesn't matter if you hold the other guy to 10. So if Oklahoma's going to get 20 on the board, a lot of them feel like that's going to be good enough to win. Plus, they're going to listen to people talk about how they don't really deserve to be there, some people. You know, Dusty Dvorak's going to make sure, Gabe Eicher, Teddy Lehman going to make sure they scour the internet and find every disrespectful comment about Oklahoma, of which there will be many, and plaster them all over the place. And they absolutely will. I'm not going to contribute, though, because I believe in a complementary style of football. If you get praised for scoring 50 points a game offensively, you also ought to get praised for what you hold teams to defensively. So it's a home game at Oklahoma. Oh, they asked me when I did get up the other day, Greeny said, "You're the commissioner, what would you do?" I listed a few other things, but pretty high on my list was giving us more home playoff games. If we've got to expand the playoff, and we did, how do we look and say, we only want one round. We only want one round of this. No. Give me as many rounds of that as possible, Immunity. That's going to be great. And that's, in case you missed it, that is a Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. local time kick. Alabama at Oklahoma is the Friday night game. And then Saturday, you've got 3 games. Speaking of which, I've got thoughts on another game. So we know that game's on a Friday night. Well, what about Saturday? Miami at Texas A&M is set as a first-round playoff game. This game kicks off Saturday, December 20th. That's the good news. The bad news is 11 a.m. local kick. I understand the broadcast parameters, like those are kind of fixed times, so you don't have much control over that because clearly, like, you're going to select the best 2 games if you're ESPN, and then you have sub-licensed the other games to TNT. They get 3rd and 4th pick, but they do get the primetime spots. It is what it is. A&M a 5.5-point favorite at FanDuel right now. Interested to see if that number moves any. So, both teams will struggle to run the ball in this game. That is my strong suspicion. Now, if A&M can run the ball, they'll win the game. If they can't, or if it's limited, and it stands to be because Miami brings a top 10 run defense into Kyle Field, then it once again falls on the shoulders of Marcel Reed. And kind of like we talked about with Ty Simpson, but more so with Marcel Reed, it's just going to be a high-risk, high-reward sort of an approach. That's kind of how I would see this game playing out. Marcel Reed could give you a performance that makes me look and say, had I gotten more of that down the stretch, my Heisman ticket would have cashed. That could happen. Or Miami could get outgained by 30 yards but be +3 in turnovers and walk out of there having stolen a win. That could be one of 2 ways that this goes. But what I love is, as far as their playoff hopes go, Texas A&M is in a shockingly similar position as Ohio State was last year. To lesser attention, because Ohio State lost against Michigan as a 3-touchdown favorite, whereas A&M lost to Texas, and that was expected to be a close game. And also that game happened on a Friday of a rivalry week. So it happened, and then it was kind of out of people's main focus of attention. But it happened. So in that building, that's all that's mattered. And they lost that game, and they knew they were still going to host a playoff game. You will have had 3 weeks of rest by the time this game kicks off. They're going to put pressure on Carson Beck. Miami has not been a very good road team. Now, these last few weeks notwithstanding, like Mario could listen to this show and hit us up right now and say, did you see the Pitt game? Yes, that's why I said last few weeks notwithstanding. Because I also saw the SMU game. So we do have to remember the entire sample size here. And they're going to go into, by far, the most hostile environment they will have played in all year. Some of those kids have never played in an environment like this. And they will face, Jesse, I think the best pass rush that they will have seen all year. So that's Carson Beck under pressure. And that is, that's a situation where he's had his ups and downs this year. But think about that, not only from Miami's hopes of winning the game, but from an NFL perspective. I mean, if you're a scout and you're kind of wondering, what do I make of Carson Beck? Buddy, just tune into this game. But yards per carry, I think, will be huge here. I don't want to make it padlock stat time right now because we've got 12 days or so until this game. But it's going to be, at yards per carry stat, that's going to be pretty glaring. But again, we just talked about the Oklahoma-Alabama game. Think about this game. Just picture it for a second. Kyle Field, early kickoff, but Kyle Field hosting a playoff game. It's all I've ever wanted for Billy Lucci. It's all I've ever wanted. There's a rumor floating around, by the way, that Lucci invited me to his wedding. Like, where did that come from? On what Texas message board was that born? I don't know. Now, there was a wedding that involved one of the two of us, and one of the two of us was invited, but I think they got the story a little backwards. It pays to scour the internet. You know what else pays? PateStateMaterial.com, because that's where you can go and grab yourself a "'Tis the Season to Be Chuggy" sweater. I saw so many of these floating around the lobby the other night. I have dropped the ball on our own merchandise because I haven't gotten Alex to ship me any of our "'Tis the Season" merch, our Christmas merch. You guys have bought it by the truckload, though. So a lot of you showed up to the live show the other night. Many of you who walked up at the meet and greet afterwards, you heard me look at your shirt and say, "Oh, wow, that's the first time I've seen this." It's because it's the first time that I've seen it. I don't peruse the warehouse nearly as frequently as I should, and that's on me. And I don't make sure that I'm stocked up with our stuff nearly as much as I should, and that's on me. But your Christmas shopping is on you. And in order to check that list off as expeditiously as possible, PateStateMaterial.com is here to help. Let's continue. Now we have to get uncomfortable. Now we have to broach the subject everyone's talking about. Yeah, so we have two G5 teams in the playoff. Tulane, Ole Miss, JMU, Oregon. We do regrettably have the point spreads for these games, courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook. Tulane is a 17.5-point dog against Ole Miss. And you may be thinking to yourself, didn't I already see that game? Yeah, Ole Miss beat them by 35 the first time around. Nextly, JMU at Oregon. Oregon a casual 21.5-point favorite in a playoff game. So people have some really, really strong thoughts on this. I've had strong thoughts on this for a while. I've told you for a while. It makes no sense that college football is structured the way it is, for many reasons. But it makes no sense that college football pretends like 136 teams are playing the same sport. It's so obvious they're not. And so I've gotten two bits of pushback on that. One bit of criticism is, why do you want to hold down smaller teams? Why do you want to choke off the one chance they have to compete? I don't. I'll get to that in a second. And then the other one is, well, if they don't get that opportunity, then you're financially cutting them off and they die on the vine. I don't want that. You got to get some smart people in the room to understand we can restructure the playoff, or we can rebuild the playoff actually entirely to where you don't have G5 inclusion in the main playoff and still have a very, very nice revenue-producing product that is exclusively G5. You know, a world where JMU could actually win the title or Tulane could actually win the title. Now, everybody logically watching this or listening to this knows Oregon's not playing the same sport as JMU. Everybody knows Ole Miss is not playing the same sport as Tulane. Everybody knows that. But for some reason, we're still forced to pretend they are when it comes playoff time. So you can say what I just said without having disdain or hate in your heart for the G5. I feel the total opposite. I love G5 football. I'd like to build a world. I'd like to build an ecosystem where it thrives, not cutting it out of this system to watch it die. That's not how that has to happen. But the mental gymnastics that proponents of G5 inclusion put themselves through are so mind-numbing that I just remove myself from the conversation, because the way I look at it is, no G5 team's ever going to win this national championship. Certainly they're not. So, it's never like they're going to make a run in the playoff. The worst that happens is it takes away and robs us of what would be far more premier first-round playoff games. And then JMU and Tulane will get disposed of in the first round because they're far inferior teams, and then we'll move on about the playoff. So it's not like I'm going to get burned. There is no Boise, Oklahoma 2007 coming to rescue you on this argument. So the argument you're making is a very bad faith argument if you're making this one. Well, upsets have happened before. That's not even, it's so far away from the point that it doesn't even deserve a reply. But here's the reply. I don't care if JMU goes and beats Oregon. It doesn't disprove my point. My point is they don't deserve inclusion in this format because I could take Auburn and have them play JMU's schedule, and they're probably an 11-1 team or possibly undefeated. Auburn. You look at some of the advanced metrics. They would tell you Auburn's about the 26th to 30th best team in the country right now. They'd probably be favored top to bottom against JMU's schedule. The point there is we're not playing the same sport. We're not looking at the same sport. So the one bad faith argument is someone will cherry pick this one example of an upset happening. And they'll say, see, you can't say that wouldn't happen. My point is not even that it's impossible for them to pull the upset if they get in the playoff. My point is they shouldn't be in the playoff to begin with because the road that they took looks way different than the road these other teams have to take. That's part one. Part two is with all this money floating around right now, people are insane if they don't think a G5 playoff would sell and sell big. Do you understand how desperate other networks are for quality postseason college football inventory? I used to work at one up until very recently that is void of it entirely. You don't think that if we took a package of G5 playoff games and put them on any network, that it wouldn't sell? Of course it would. There are going to be a lot of proposals coming up about the entire world of the way that since the SCORE Act died in Congress, the way that we can move forward. And you hear all kinds of pitches about private equity and people just looking to invest in college football. Invest in a G5 playoff. Everybody wins. I'm not trying to box you out, by the way, because I would love a world where promotion and relegation existed. What that looks like is, I don't want to pick any one individual program, but if you're a program that just continues to suck year in and year out, and you keep beating your chest, go, hey man, we're still in the Big Ten or the SEC no matter what, well, maybe you shouldn't automatically be. Maybe if you're that bad for that long, maybe you ought to drop down and Tulane ought to jump up. I wouldn't have a problem with that. A little advancement and escape hatch built on that system, but to sit here and pretend like 136 teams play the same sport is so stupid. So the money's there to figure this out, because really what the argument always boils down to is a fundamental argument. No one really looks at JMU and Tulane in the playoff and thinks to themselves, yep, purely from a competitive standpoint, this makes sense to me. You don't think that. If you're a JMU fan, I got one on our staff. He looks at it and says, I love it because I love JMU. Totally fine. I'd say the same thing if I were you, Prez. Or if you're a Tulane fan. Or if you're a fan of any team that competes for this thing. You want to make it because you want to make it. I am talking about removing that lens and looking at it purely from a logic-based competitive standpoint. No one looks at this and thinks it makes sense. So the argument doesn't come to that. The argument comes to, if we're not involved in the college football playoff, we can't make enough money to survive. And what I'm saying is there is plenty enough money floating around the world of college athletics to get it figured out. That's my point on that whole thing. And it should have long ago gotten figured out, but it still hasn't. Our friends at FanDuel hit us up early today. Of course, they gave us all the numbers. Those first-round spreads, very interesting. Very interesting. But I don't want to talk to you about that today. So if you watch the show, you know that we partnered with FanDuel a little over a year and a half ago. One of the main things that I proposed / demanded when I sat at the table with FanDuel is I said, we have got to heavily infuse responsible gaming into the show. So FanDuel always gets a read. They get placement in the show. But one of our non-negotiables was occasionally I got to talk to folks who are at risk of gambling addiction or who are making some very irresponsible decisions when it comes to sports betting. And they said, not only are we okay with it, we'll support it. And they put their money where their mouth is. So you see on this monitor over my shoulder here, if you're listening on podcast, it says Trusted Voices. It is an entire separate vehicle. It's not part of FanDuel. FanDuel has just partnered with it. Conversations about betting, it's a website. And it is totally designed to equip adults, you could be a parent, you could be a coach, with tools and resources to talk to younger people about gambling. Because one of the worst things, it happened to me. One day I was sitting in a guy's house who I used to go watch NFL Sunday with. It was when, online gambling first became a thing. This is offshore. These are the old school days. And I bet 2 4-team NFL parlays. I hit them both, thought I was invincible, and ended up losing a ton of money over the next year or two of my life because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. That's called irresponsible gaming. So this is a program whether someone advises you on it or whether you yourself take part in it. It's led by FanDuel Responsible Gaming ambassadors, and Randy Livingston is a retired pro basketball player, and his wife is an attorney and a basketball agent. They kind of partnered to build this thing. They're very short, digestible videos. They're like 2 to 5 minutes long. They got downloadable toolkits. It gives you the information you need to know. What to avoid, what to look for. It's not at FanDuel, so it's not on the app. I would advise you, though, if you're interested in this, go to conversationsaboutbetting.com, and it's very well done. That's why we're talking about it on the show. Very well done. So good tool there for parents, good tool for coaches, or just if you're friends with a dude who you know's in trouble right now, just give him the link and then talk some sense into him. All right, lastly, before we get out of here, you didn't possibly think the show was going to end without me acknowledging this. After 54 long days, the Penn State Nittany Lions have hired a head coach, and whomst amongst us could ever have seen it coming? But Matt Campbell is the new head coach at Penn State. I have to be an incredibly big man right now. And for those of you who are listening, I have my eyes closed because this is where I get myself in a safe mental space where I don't say the words "I told you so." Because the last thing we want to do on this show, is beat people over the head with "I told you so." But I'll tell you what I felt like I just watched. I feel like I just watched Penn State go all the way around the world to find treasure in their backyard. This should have been the first call they made. They weren't getting Freeman. They weren't getting DeBoer. None of those Grand Slam, like unicorn candidates were going to be available. That should have always been evident. Mike Elko, they were not close on him. I am just telling you from firsthand knowledge that was not happening. But Matt Campbell could have happened. And you could have saved yourself potentially a recruiting class. And you could have saved yourself a lot of heartache. Anyway, Matt Campbell finally happened. There are two perspectives on this, and they're just fascinating. Because I have banged the drum for Matt Campbell on this show as the best candidate for Penn State since they fired James Franklin. The first night after they fired Franklin, we came on the air and I said, Matt Campbell ought to be the one you target. So that's why I'm speaking the way I'm speaking. Football people will universally praise Matt Campbell. You will never find a football guy who speaks ill of him. They all universally respect him. The NFL heavily respects him. He has turned down NFL head coaching jobs in the last 5 years. So they think sky high of him. His peers think the world of him. Nobody who pushed back on the concept of Matt Campbell getting the Penn State job ever gave me football-related reasoning. Or if they did, it was very ignorant and it was short-sighted. And it was like, well, he hasn't even won the Big 12. In college football, it is not the NFL. You don't all work on the same platform. In the NFL, everyone plays by the same rules. Everyone's allowed the same draft picks. Everyone's working on a salary cap. None of that exists in college football. So if you're the head coach at Texas and you're the head coach at Iowa State, you live in two different worlds. You have two totally different existences. So Matt Campbell, in the 130-some-odd year history of Iowa State, is in the midst right now of the best 3-year stretch they've ever had. They just won 8 games. You win 8 games at Florida, and they don't like it. You win 8 games at Alabama, that's cause for concern. You win 8 games at Iowa State, it's one of the best seasons they've ever had. And he just did that on the heels of going to the Big 10 or Big 12 championship game last year. So people who said, oh man, he hadn't won big games, you have no clue what you're talking about. Relative to expectation and relative to resource, he crushed it at Iowa State. So no one brought any football-related counter-arguments to the table because there really are none. Here's what a lot of people said. They didn't trust their own instinct. They blindly trusted rumors or perceptions of other instincts when they said, well, if he's so great, if Matt Campbell's so great, how come he hadn't gotten job offers before? And I bit my tongue as long as I could, and then I couldn't take it anymore. And I told you on the show a couple of weeks ago, they have. They've come his way. Tennessee came his way. Florida State came his way. The Detroit Lions came his way. USC was at the 11th hour a few years ago. A lot of jobs came his way. That's not an exhaustive list, by the way. Those are just some that have sort of quasi-leaked out there and I'm comfortable talking about. He didn't leave because he didn't want to leave. And you may think to yourself, that's crazy. Iowa State? Oh, you get on the first thing smoking out of Iowa State. Well, maybe if you were the head coach there, you would. But he's not like everyone else. So we went up there last spring because I kind of wanted him to talk on the record about this. And he did. And I think you'll be fascinated to listen to this. This is a little glimpse into why Matt Campbell didn't just move at the first opportunity. Roll it, Bradley.
Short of like internet rumors, there's never been really serious traction to you not being here. So could you walk people through as much as you can the thought process you have when you have opportunity?
You know, I've been that guy where it's like, geez, should I be climbing this ladder of job to job at a really young age to, you know, when we got to Iowa State and have been able to build something different. And I know, you know, for me, leaving the University of Toledo was really hard, to be quite honest. You know, from Ohio, my wife and I had never left Ohio at that time, 3 kids with a 4th on the way. We had grandparents and family that were, you know, anchors to us, and it was really hard to leave. And, you know, that was the first time I said, geez, I don't know if this is what I want to do. I want to be able to lay roots and build something different and something that's really special that can stand for something. And, you know, I think that's the one gratitude that I have for being the head coach. I walk in here every day and I'm just beyond grateful to be the head football coach at Iowa State. And, you know, we've been able to build a program that I really believe stands for something.
Savannah State heavily critical of my sitting posture there. It is what it is. I know no other way. Let me tell you why I think he's a perfect fit there. He's dead serious about that Toledo stuff. Matt Campbell came very close to just not leaving Toledo for Iowa State. Okay, that's how dug in he was at Toledo. And then he got to Iowa State and thought to himself, I'm not leaving here. A lot of guys talk like that and give it lip service. I don't know how else to tell you. He's just telling you the truth. Other people are lying to you. He's telling you the truth there. And so it took a lot. It took a lot to peel him out of there. Penn State was able to do it. So the first thing that I would take comfort in if I'm a Penn State if I'm a Penn State fan, one of the first things I would take comfort in is knowing that guy's not going anywhere. It was so hard to get him out of there that he's ours. The only risk you would run is, do NFL teams come calling? Like, that's all I would worry about. He's one of the best culture builders in college football. Anyone who's been around it, anyone who's played against it will attest to it. He's got sort of a magnetic quality, and his programs take on this magnetic quality, which is really important because, contrary to popular belief, this thing's still about relationship building. I was talking to Courtney Morgan at Alabama last night, and I was talking about like philosophy and recruiting and about the misnomer that, oh, it's just about paying the most for players now. And all the good general managers or all the head coaches will laugh at that. It's not about that. It's true that you could go overspend and just go assemble a bunch of talent. If you didn't build the relationship, firstly, you probably had to overpay to get the talent if you didn't build the relationship. And then secondly, they're not going to go over the cliff for you. There were a few very glaring examples, by the way, late in the season of teams that had, for lack of a better term, hired a bunch of players and the players quit on them. So what all the talent matter to you? That is not a characteristic of a Matt Campbell organization. Not only that, but because of the magnetic nature of the program, you'll find that guys take a discount to play for you, and guys will accept, in some cases, less to stay with you. I can promise you that was the case with him at Iowa State. Now he goes to a place where you'll still have all of those qualities. They will place a premium on evaluation and development. He's bringing his general manager, Derek Hooger, with him, one of the best in the business. So they'll still be good. They'll still be plus to A+ in all those categories. Now they've got big money to spend. Penn State will equip them to where they can be very competitive in the NIL market, and so you can attract a wider net. You can cast a wider net, and you can catch bigger fish in that net. They're still going to run them through the same filter that they would have run them through at Iowa State, or they're not going to play at Penn State. He is a grinder, very blue-collar mentality. It's why I always felt like his personality would be a puzzle piece fit at like 3 or 4 big programs, and this is one of them. So he won't have to get up there and pretend he has it. You know, like you guys at Penn State, you know what fits at Penn State. Some people have to pretend that they fit at Penn State. He won't have to pretend. I did want to address this, though. Okay, so I'm a big Iowa State fan. People think I'm lying about that, but I'm not. So I'm a huge Matt Campbell fan, too. Truthfully, I probably become bigger fans of coaches than programs, but I am a big Iowa State fan. Have been since I was a kid, so I got a lot of heat for how I handled this. All right, so I do want to address that because I do acknowledge it's probably a really bad look because it looked like I was trying to convince the market to like remove Iowa State's head coach. It wasn't that, but I grant that if you thought it felt that way, my bad, because that's the last thing I want to do to Iowa State. What I felt is there was a guy at Iowa State, and had been for a while, that was fully capable of taking over a top 10, top 15 job and winning. And I thought Matt Campbell was that, and maybe it's selfish, I wanted to see him take a shot. Having said that, the very next thing that happened was this news broke as I was live on stage the other night doing our live show. So I was kind of having fun with the live crowd, and I put that edit out of me and him walking down a hallway, and he's got a Penn State logo on his chest. Bad optics. Sorry about that. I grant you that. So took some heat for that. It was deserved. That's the last thing I want to do. So now, pull for Matt Campbell at Penn State. We're going to go up there tomorrow. We'll be there for the introductory press conference. Just someone tell Sean Fitz to get our room ready. Now we regroup, and now we get behind the new staff at Iowa State. And by the way, Jamie Pollard's the AD there. Just textbook clinic put on in how to be classy when what was probably an inevitability finally happens. Maybe they didn't feel like it was an inevitability, but when you're Iowa State and you got big programs that continuously come calling for your guy, eventually he may leave. He was there a decade. And so when he leaves, what do? Do you trash him on his way out the door? Do you put on this entire spectacle like we saw with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss? No. You thank him, and then you have the next hire ready to go, and boom, it's done. So, yes, I could have handled that optics-wise a lot better from the Iowa State side. So I do want to acknowledge that because it's not like I was just faking like an Iowa State. I'll be right back there in the foxhole next year. I will just also pull for Matt Campbell at Penn State. Okay, that's our show. It was a loaded show today. We've got a lot to chew on. We're right smack dab in the middle of playoff season now. Appreciate you guys so much. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I guess we're on the drive to 1 million now. I don't guess. I know. I got to go eat lunch. For Director Bradley, for producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and God bless.